And where do the India-EU talks stack up when it comes to threats from the West, particularly the United States of America? To discuss this and more, I'm being joined by Shairee Malhotra. She's Deputy Director, Strategic Studies Program at ORF, that's Observer Research Foundation. Shairee, thank you so much for joining me. Let's begin with the India-EU talks itself. Finally, there will be an announcement, but what are the areas and how long could this take? Because we do know that it requires not just ironing out the legalities, but also clearance from the EU Parliament.
Thank you, Geeta, for having me. Well, my understanding is that the negotiations have already been concluded, and we will see an announcement tomorrow during the EU-India summit. But the deal will formally be signed at a later date. The actual text is also likely to be decided later after it's properly vetted. And even after it's signed, it will take at least a year to implement the deal because it has to be ratified by the European Parliament. That is the complexity that is the EU. And if the Mercosur deal is anything to go by, we know it was blocked by the European Parliament. So this is not something that is taken for granted or a given. Having said that, this EU-India FTA is a big deal. India has signed a spate of FTAs recently, but this is a deal that combines a market of almost 2 billion people, $24 trillion, 25% of global GDP. And that's why it's being referred to as the mother of all trade deals.
Right.
It will remove trade barriers on both sides, grant greater market access at a time when India's relations and Europe's relations with both the US and China are frayed.
Well, coming to the frayed ties over here, do you think the pace with which we've seen the conversations move forward, with now an announcement coming through, is Trump a major factor in all of this?
Well, certainly the geopolitical backdrop that we are currently operating in, on the one hand, Trump's tariff wars, but let's not forget also China's unfair trading practices have created a lot of disruptions in global trade. And this is definitely one reason why the EU-India FTA negotiations were fast-tracked. One of the ways that countries are trying to manage this disruption is by deepening partnerships elsewhere. And that's why we are seeing the 16th EU-India summit taking place tomorrow against the backdrop of headlines dominated by the Greenland saga, the prospects of further US tariffs. So there are a lot of challenges that we are seeing to the global trading system, which are, of course, being accelerated by US actions. But I would argue that the EU-India partnership in trade and strategic partnership was actually deepening even before the volatility that has been unleashed by the second Trump administration. We must remember that this whole business of de-risking supply chains, diversifying economic partners, actually had China attached to it first.
Well, also, but Shairee, look at America and look at China over here. If you're looking at both the countries, most of European countries, particularly the larger economies, are now engaging China because of the unpredictability of America.
I think they have started to perhaps engage China a little bit, and this will be an interesting area to watch going forward, especially as the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is soon going to be heading to China. Chancellor Merz, the German Chancellor, will also be heading to China shortly, and we all are aware of Germany's addiction when it comes to the Chinese market, given how intertwined German companies are with the Chinese market. But I think there is a difference, and I think European economies will continue to also, on the one hand, try and de-risk from China, particularly when it comes to critical sectors. They may continue other trade with China as usual. And that's actually quite similar to what India is doing as well. India's own trade with China, despite the border tensions, because of the disengagement at the borders, has actually, is very much on the right track and has actually increased. So I think the EU and India are looking at the China challenge through a similar perspective as well.
Right. Shairee Malhotra, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective. Thank you.